If you're out there making the wheels turn, maybe wrestling an 18-wheeler through city traffic or taking a break somewhere on the long haul, you are definitely living through some serious shifts in the trucking world.
Yeah, yeah.
It can feel like the ground is moving under your tires sometimes, right?
Uh-huh.
That's kind of why we're here today.
Exactly. We've pulled together a bunch of recent developments hitting the industry, and, well, we're going to unpack what they really mean for you.
Hmm.
Think of this as your shortcut to staying informed. We'll be looking at everything from California's big push for electric trucks at their ports
Right.
to the, let's face it, never-ending story of freight rates, the way trucking companies are merging,
Oh, yeah.
and even Mack's brand new long-haul rig. Plus, we'll touch on the Supreme Court's recent decision on marijuana testing and why more owner-operators seem to be deciding to hang up their keys.
And while that might sound like a really full plate, these aren't just separate issues floating out there in space.
No, not at all.
They're all connected, like threads in the bigger picture of your daily grind and, frankly, your future on the road. We've looked at a variety of angles on each of these, so our mission today is really to give you the straight goods, what's really important, what to watch out for, and maybe even a few things to think about down the line without getting, bogged down in endless details. So, ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's start out west. California. There's a pretty significant move happening with electric trucks.
Okay.
A nonprofit called Climate United, they're planning to put $250 million into getting 500 electric semi-trucks leased out at California ports. This is over the next 3 years.
Wow, 500. That's quite a few.
It is, and it's happening thanks to a big chunk of change, $6.97 billion total from the National Clean Investment Fund. What's really interesting here is why this leasing model is the chosen route.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because the price tag on these electric trucks is just, it's eye-watering, isn't it?
It really is.
We're talking $350,000 to $450,000. So leasing them makes that initial jump a lot less daunting, I guess, for independent drivers who might be curious but just can't drop that kind of cash all at once.
Exactly.
And it's not just the trucks themselves, right? The initiative also includes setting up the charging stations you'd need.
Right, around the ports and along those crucial freight corridors. You really can't have one without the other, can you?
No, it's like trying to run a marathon without any water stops.
Yeah,
It just doesn't work.
exactly. The infrastructure is just as critical as the trucks. But, this also brings up some very real questions for the drivers, the kind of stuff that keeps you up at night.
Like what?
The nitty-gritty.
Yeah, the nitty-gritty. Things like, what exactly will these lease agreements look like? Who do you actually call when you break down in an electric rig? Is it different?
Good point.
How easy will it be to find a working and available charging station when you really need it? Time is money. And when they talk about competitive rates for the leases, what does that actually mean for your bottom line? Yeah, define competitive.
Right. And maybe the biggest question of all, what happens after those 3 years are up? Do you get the option to buy the truck? What shape will the battery be in by then? Battery life is a huge factor.
Those are definitely the details every trucker needs to know. It sounds good on paper, sure, but we all know the devil's in those details.
Always.
We're seeing the official line from state regulators, and they're pretty upbeat because, well, this helps them get closer to their goal of banning diesel trucks at the ports eventually.
Makes sense for them.
And environmental groups are also cheering this on as a great example of, public and private sectors working together for cleaner air.
But when you talk to the men and women actually behind the wheel, the picture is, it's more complex.
Oh, so?
Well, younger drivers seem more willing to maybe give it a shot, perhaps seeing it as a chance for more consistent work with newer equipment.
Okay.
But those seasoned port haulers, they're often more reserved and, frankly, with good reason.
Yeah, they've seen things come and go.
Exactly. They've seen grand plans come and go, and they're naturally cautious about more red tape, more potential loss of control. There's definitely a healthy dose of show me, don't tell me out there.
I get that. So the potential insight here is while electrification offers a path towards cleaner operations and maybe a lower maintenance eventually, the immediate questions around practicality and cost for individual operators are, well, they're significant, huge even.
Very significant. And the broader industry, they're watching this really closely.
Oh, I bet.
Big fleets are trying to figure out if this leasing model could be something they adopt, and they're also wondering how it will affect the landscape for independent owner-operators.
Right, the competition aspect.
Yeah, and unions and driver associations are pushing for transparency on who will actually qualify for these leases. Is this truly going to benefit the independent trucker, or will it just strengthen the hand of the brokers somehow?
That's a key question.
And you can bet that all the tech companies involved in charging infrastructure and battery tech are seeing a big potential market here, especially if this initiative expands beyond California.
So for you, the listener, especially if you're an independent owner-operator running those lanes, keep your eyes peeled on how this unfolds. It could offer new opportunities, sure, but you'll need to weigh the potential against all those unknowns we just talked about.
Definitely. Okay, let's move on to something that feels like a constant headache for so many drivers. Freight rates.
Ah, yes, the million-dollar topic. Or maybe the 50-cent topic sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. There's a real sense out there, you hear it all the time, that the deck is stacked against drivers. Rates often feel way too low for the amount of work and stress involved.
And that feeling is often spot on. There's frequently a big difference between what the shipper pays to move their goods and what the trucker actually ends up with in their pocket.
Right.
And that gap, it's largely filled by the various middlemen in the system. The brokers, the dispatchers, the load boards.
It's like a multi-stage rocket launch, isn't it? With a piece of your earnings falling off at each stage.
That's a good analogy. Brokers, for example, they can take a significant cut. We hear numbers anywhere from 20% to sometimes as much as 50% of the total load payment.
50%. That's, wow.
Yeah. And look, while some brokers definitely provide a valuable service, connecting loads, keeping things moving smoothly,
Sure, good ones do.
there are valid concerns about the lack of transparency in their fees. And then there's the issue of double brokering.
Ugh, yeah. Where a load gets handed off from one broker to another and each one takes their cut before it even reaches the driver.
It feels like playing a game where the rules keep changing, and you never quite know who's taking a piece of the pie.
And it doesn't stop there, does it? The very platforms and tools that are supposed to help you find work also have their hands in the game.
Like load boards.
Yeah, load boards charge fees to both the carriers looking for loads and the brokers posting them. Factoring companies, they offer quick payment on your invoices, which sounds great for cash flow.
Can be a lifesaver sometimes.
It can, but they take a percentage right off the top for that service. And even dispatchers, while they can be incredibly helpful in managing logistics, sometimes charge fees that don't really seem to align with the actual value they provide in that specific instance.
So the core insight here is that the freight rate you see isn't the full picture. Not even close sometimes.
Not at all. Understanding all the players involved and where the cuts are happening is just crucial for managing your business.
We hear it constantly from owner-operators who are just battling to cover their basic operating costs, fuel, insurance, the ever-rising cost of maintenance, while the freight rates seem stuck in the mud. And company drivers feel the impact too, right?
Yeah.
They often see fewer available loads, maybe smaller bonuses when overall rates decline.
Yeah, it trickles down. And for those just starting out in the industry, the initial promise of good earnings can quickly fade when they encounter the reality of low rates and all those unexpected expenses.
It can feel like you're constantly running just to stay in the same place, almost like a hamster wheel.
That's a good way to put it. What's really interesting, too, is the feeling that the system isn't just complex, but maybe actively working against the drivers sometimes.
How so? What contributes to that feeling?
Well, a big part of it is the lack of clear information about how much the original shipper actually paid for a load. Brokers generally aren't required to disclose this, right?
No.
So you might accept a load for what seems like a reasonable amount, only to maybe find out later, through the grapevine or whatever, that the shipper paid significantly more. That stings.
Oh, yeah.
Then there's just the simple economics of supply and demand. When there are more trucks available than loads that need moving, which have been the case recently, rates tend to drop, and brokers just have more leverage in negotiations.
Basic supply and demand, yeah.
And even technology can play a role here, maybe not always in a good way for the driver. Algorithms used by some load boards track how often you accept or reject loads.
I've heard about this.
Yeah, and consistently turning down those low-paying offers can sometimes result in you being shown fewer or maybe less desirable loads in the future. It feels like being penalized for trying to earn a fair wage.
So, okay, it sounds a bit bleak, but what can drivers actually do about it?
No.
It's not all a losing battle, is it?
No, definitely not. Our sources offer some really practical advice here. First and foremost, something we always talk about, knowing your true cost per mile.
Non-negotiable.
Absolutely non-negotiable. What does it actually cost you to operate your truck? If a rate doesn't cover your minimum expenses plus some profit, you're essentially digging yourself into a hole.
Right. You're paying to work.
Exactly. Second, exploring opportunities to work directly with shippers. Now, this might take more time and effort, building those relationships, managing contracts.
The more work up front.
It is, but it cuts out the intermediary and potentially gets you paid closer to what the shipper is actually willing to pay.
Makes sense. And the third thing.
Leveraging smart tools. There are apps and platforms out there now that provide data on average rates for specific lanes, broker ratings, even tips for negotiating. Using those can give you a significant advantage in the rate game.
So knowledge is power, basically.
Absolutely. Understanding how these dynamics work can really empower you to make smarter business decisions. Knowing where your money is going, where you might be getting shortchanged, that's the first step towards improving your profitability and just making your business more sustainable in the long run.
Taking control of the information.
Using it to your advantage, exactly.
Okay, let's pivot now to another significant trend we're seeing. Consolidation within the trucking industry. We recently saw Proficient Auto Logistics, a pretty major player in auto transport, acquire a Pennsylvania-based auto hauler.
Right.
And this isn't just a one-off. It seems like part of a broader pattern of companies merging and acquiring others.
That's right. These kinds of acquisitions are often driven by the desire for greater scale. Simple as that, often.
Bigger is better, in their view.
Often, yeah. Larger companies want to expand their geographical reach, gain more control over important transportation routes, and offer a more comprehensive package of services, especially to big clients, like the auto manufacturers in this particular case.
Ah, okay. So they can offer a bundle deal.
Exactly. It allows them to become a more integrated, maybe coast-to-coast solution, which can be really attractive to major shippers looking for simplicity and reliability.
So for the industry as a whole, this trend means maybe fewer independent players and potentially more concentrated power among the larger corporations.
That's generally the direction it heads, yeah.
So if you're a trucker, maybe working for a company that gets acquired, what should you be paying attention to? What changes?
Well, in the short term, your day-to-day operations could definitely see some changes. Your regular routes might be adjusted. Maybe terminals could be closed or merged.
Yeah.
And you might find yourself reporting to a whole new management team with different procedures, different expectations. It can definitely create some uncertainty and require you to adapt pretty quickly.
And beyond the practical stuff like routes and terminals.
There can also be a shift in company culture. You know, a smaller, maybe family-owned company might have a more personal touch.
Yeah, you know everyone.
Right. Whereas a larger corporation often operates with more standardized policies, maybe a different communication style. For drivers, this can sometimes feel like moving away from a familiar environment to a more, well, impersonal one.
Loss of that mom and pop feel.
Exactly. And of course, there are always concerns about job security. While acquisitions can sometimes lead to growth and new opportunities,
That's the positive spin.
that's the positive spin. But they can also result in redundancies, maybe terminal closures in certain areas that affect you, and adjustments to pay and benefits packages. The key insight really is that consolidation can bring both potential benefits and drawbacks for drivers. Staying informed is just crucial.
It seems like there are different perspectives on these deals depending on who you ask.
Oh, definitely. From the executive level, it's often framed in terms of market expansion and creating synergies and business speak for becoming bigger and hopefully more efficient.
Right.
Investors generally view consolidation favorably because it can lead to greater economies of scale and potentially higher profits down the line.
Makes sense for them.
Yeah.
But the drivers,
The drivers. When you talk to them, the feelings are often much more mixed. Some might see the potential for better resources, maybe more stable work with a larger company.
okay, there's that side.
But many others are wary. They've witnessed smaller, independent companies kind of lose their identity, lose that connection with their employees after being absorbed by a larger entity.
So if your company is the one being acquired, what steps can you take? What should you do?
Well, our sources really emphasize the importance of staying informed. Get the details of the deal, ask questions specifically about how it will directly impact your job, your pay, your benefits, the company's operational policies.
Don't be afraid to ask.
Absolutely. Talk to your fellow drivers too. They can often be a really valuable source of information and support during these transitions.
Strength in numbers, maybe.
Kind of. And critically, carefully review any new employment agreements or contracts you're asked to sign before committing. Understand what you're signing.
Good advice. This trend of consolidation is clearly reshaping the trucking landscape.
Yeah.
So being aware of its potential effects and being proactive in seeking information seems essential for navigating your career.
It really is.
Okay, let's switch gears now. Let's talk about something new on the hardware front. Mack Trucks has just launched its Pioneer long-haul truck.
Yeah.
And it looks like they're making a serious push to compete in a segment of the market that's, well, often dominated by a few other big players.
That's right. Mack is really emphasizing the Pioneer as a truck designed with the driver's needs truly in mind.
Driver-centric, they call it.
Exactly. And when you look at the features they're highlighting, it seems they've put a significant focus on both comfort and practicality.
Like what specifically?
Well, we're talking about larger sleeper cabs, improved seat design for better ergonomics, less backache, hopefully enhanced noise reduction in the cabin.
Oh, that's huge on a long trip.
Isn't it? And more advanced heating and cooling systems. For anyone who spends days or weeks living and working out of their truck, these are features that can make a real, tangible difference in their quality of life on the road.
Absolutely. When your truck is essentially your mobile office in your home away from home, those kinds of comfort features aren't just luxuries, they're crucial. Crucial for well-being, reducing driver fatigue, all that stuff.
Totally agree. And the Pioneer isn't just about a comfy cab. They're packing it with technology, too.
What kind of tech?
Features like lane departure assist, adaptive cruise control that automatically adjusts your speed to maintain a safe following distance.
Becoming pretty standard now, but good to have.
Yeah. And a user-friendly touchscreen interface that provides vehicle diagnostics, route optimization suggestions, and even real-time tracking of your fuel consumption.
Okay, that sounds useful, but, there's always a bit of caution when it comes to new tech in trucks, isn't there?
Oh, for sure.
You don't want to be reliant on a system that could potentially fail at a critical moment or be super expensive to fix.
That's a very valid point, and it's something that many truckers are definitely considering. While the potential for increased safety and efficiency is appealing, there are also real questions about the long-term reliability of these systems.
Right.
And the availability of qualified technicians and, crucially, affordable parts when things inevitably need fixing. Plus, just the overall learning curve for drivers who might be more accustomed to, let's say, more traditional trucks.
Good points. What about fuel efficiency? That's always king.
Huge focus there. Fuel efficiency is a major selling point for the Pioneer. Mack is highlighting aerodynamic improvements and powertrain upgrades designed specifically to reduce fuel consumption, which, as we all know, is a massive operating cost.
One of the biggest.
And it's also compliant with the latest emissions regulations from the EPA and California's CARB, which is, increasingly important in today's regulatory environment. You have to be compliant.
So what are the reactions you're hearing from actual truckers? What's the buzz?
It's a range, really. Many experienced veteran drivers are taking a kind of wait-and-see approach.
Skeptical.
A healthy skepticism, yeah. They want to see how the Pioneer performs in real world, demanding conditions, especially hauling heavy loads, long distances, challenging terrain. They've seen good-looking trucks before that didn't quite live up to the hype,
Been there, done that.
Exactly. Younger drivers, maybe those in company fleet operations, seem a bit more intrigued by the technology and the potential for increased comfort and safety features.
Okay.
But across the board, there are legitimate concerns about the overall cost of ownership, the purchase price plus maintenance, and the potential for expensive repairs down the line, especially with all that tech.
So what about dealers and fleets?
Dealers seem optimistic, naturally, and some larger fleets have reportedly already placed pre-orders, likely seeing it as a way to attract and retain drivers in what's still a competitive labor market.
Makes sense as a recruitment tool.
Independent owner-operators, however, are generally adopting a more cautious stance. They want to see real-world performance data, hear feedback from drivers who've actually put the truck through its paces before making such a significant investment.
Smart move.
Ultimately, as our sources emphasize, the true value of the Pioneer, or any new truck really, will come down to its ability to deliver on fuel efficiency, minimize downtime due to maintenance and repairs, and genuinely enhance driver comfort, not just how cool it looks on the lot.
So bottom line, if you're considering a new truck, do your homework. Look beyond the initial marketing hype and dig into the real-world performance and reliability data.
Absolutely critical.
Okay, now let's delve into a recent legal development that's definitely got a lot of people talking. The Supreme Court recently sided with the truck driver who was fired after testing positive for marijuana. Even though he apparently used it legally during his off-duty time in a state where it's permitted, This decision has definitely stirred up some important conversations.
It's a significant ruling, no doubt about it, because the court essentially acknowledged that current methods of testing for marijuana can be, well, problematic and potentially unfair.
How so? What's the core issue?
Well, as our sources explain, the issue isn't really that these tests detect impairment at the time of testing. That's the key.
Ah, okay.
Instead, they detect the presence of THC, which can remain in the body for an extended period, weeks, even months, sometimes long after any psychoactive effects have worn off.
So a positive test doesn't necessarily mean the driver was high while driving.
Exactly. It just means they used it at some point in the past. In this specific case, the driver was using cannabis legally off-duty in his own time. But federal regulations, the DOT rules, still prohibit any marijuana use for commercial driver's license, CDL holders. That conflict led to his termination.
So the court recognized the limitation of the tests.
Yeah, the key insight here is that recognition of the limitations of current testing technology and the potential for it to unfairly penalize drivers for legal off-duty conduct.
Okay, so while this Supreme Court victory is undoubtedly a win for that individual driver, it's really important to reiterate the federal DOT regulations regarding marijuana use for CDL holders are still in effect, right?
Absolute critical point.
Yeah.
This ruling does not mean that drivers can now freely use cannabis without consequences under DOT rules.
Right.
However, what it does do is highlight a real conflict between evolving state laws, where cannabis is becoming legal in more places, and the more stringent federal regulations. And it really shines a light on whether blanket zero-tolerance policies for marijuana testing are still appropriate given the science.
It brings up that fundamental question, doesn't it? What constitutes being safe versus what is simply legal off-duty?
Exactly. Most professional drivers are absolutely committed to safety. They wouldn't dream of driving while impaired by
Or
anything.
not.
However, many feel that it's fundamentally unjust to potentially lose their livelihood over something that is legal in a growing number of states, especially if it's done responsibly during their personal time and has zero impact on their ability to safely operate a vehicle while on duty.
So what are the reactions you're seeing across the industry?
It's a mix, as you'd expect. Fleet owners are understandably concerned about potential legal challenges to their existing drug testing policies and maybe the need to potentially revise those policies in light of this ruling.
Okay, uncertainty for them.
Yeah. Drivers, by and large, seem to view this as a positive step towards fairness and maybe a greater respect for their personal autonomy during off-duty hours.
A matter of respect.
Safety advocacy groups, on the other hand, tend to express more caution, emphasizing, quite rightly, the paramount importance of preventing any form of impaired driving, regardless of the substance.
So what are the potential ripple effects here? Where could this lead?
Well, this ruling could spur more research and development into better methods of testing for actual impairment in real time. Things like breathalyzers or maybe more accurate saliva tests that can detect active impairment rather than just the presence of THC metabolites from past use.
Technology catching up with the legal changes.
Hopefully. We could also see more legal challenges to existing drug testing policies within the transportation industry based on this precedent. And further down the line, it's possible we might see some evolution in how trucking companies approach the issue of off-duty legal marijuana use, perhaps moving away from strict zero-tolerance policies towards more nuanced approaches that focus squarely on actual impairment while on the job.
Interesting. So the core takeaway seems to be that the Supreme Court's decision serves as a clear signal, maybe a wake-up call, that the industry needs to reevaluate its drug testing practices to better align with current scientific understanding and the evolving legal landscape.
I think that's a fair assessment.
And for you, the listener, this ruling really touches on important principles of fairness and personal responsibility within the context of safety-sensitive jobs. Lots to think about there.
Definitely. Okay, finally, let's address a worrying trend we're seeing. A growing number of owner-operators who are deciding to leave the trucking industry altogether in 2025.
Yeah, this one feels particularly tough. It seems the traditional dream of being your own boss behind the wheel is becoming increasingly difficult to achieve and sustain for a lot of folks.
Sadly, that appears to be the reality. Our sources point to a confluence, kind of perfect storm of really significant financial pressures that are forcing owner-operators to make this incredibly tough choice.
What are the main culprits?
We're talking about stubbornly high fuel prices, the continuous rise, sometimes skyrocketing rise in insurance premiums.
Insurance is brutal.
Brutal. The ever-increasing costs of truck repairs and just routine maintenance. And then back to our earlier topic, freight rates that, for many, just aren't keeping pace with all these rising expenses.
It's a recipe for a shrinking profit margin, or no margin at all.
Exactly. And a lot of sleepless nights worrying about making ends meet.
And it's not just the direct economic headwinds, is it? Regulations play a part too.
Oh, absolutely. The increasing burden of regulations is also playing a substantial role. Things like California's AB5 law impacting independence, the stricter emission standards being implemented in various regions.
More costs, more compliance.
Right. The ongoing requirements for electronic logging devices, ELDs, which some still struggle with, and just the general complexities of compliance paperwork, it all adds to the challenges and the costs of operating independently.
And then there's the elephant in the room, automation.
Yeah, that looms large too. The knowledge that autonomous trucking technology is advancing, even if it's not widespread yet, creates uncertainty about the long-term viability of the traditional owner-operator model. So the core insight here is that it's really a multifaceted issue. It's both financial and regulatory pressures pushing people out.
Who are we seeing leave? Is it mostly newer folks or veterans?
It seems to be across the board. We're hearing from veteran drivers who are simply feeling burnt out after years, decades even, of hard work, often finding themselves earning less despite working longer and harder hours.
That's demoralizing.
Very. Newer owner-operators, maybe those who entered the market during a temporary surge in demand a couple of years ago, are now facing that double whammy of high initial truck costs and significantly lower freight rates now. They might be struggling under a mountain of debt.
Drat.
Feels like it. And then there's a significant segment of experienced owner-operators, maybe you could call them the silent middle, who are quietly making plans to exit the industry. Not because they lack the skills or the desire to drive, but because the financial and regulatory burdens have simply become unsustainable for them.
It's what one of your sources called the freedom trap.
Nah.
Right.
Yeah, I thought that was an apt description. The initial appeal of being your own boss, having control over your schedule, that can quickly devolve into overwhelming stress, financial instability, and a real lack of the safety net that company drivers often have. Things like health insurance, retirement plans.
Right. As an owner-operator, you wear all the hats.
You really do. You're not just the driver, you're also the dispatcher, the accountant, the mechanic, the compliance officer. It's a huge mental and financial load. And for many, the question ultimately becomes, is this independence worth the constant uphill battle? And increasingly, many are concluding that, for them, it isn't anymore.
So for those listeners who are currently owner-operators, these challenges likely resonate really deeply with their own experiences.
I imagine so.
And if you're someone considering taking that leap into becoming an owner-operator, it sounds absolutely vital to do your homework, look at the current realities of the market, and really carefully assess if it's the right move for you right now.
Couldn't agree more. Eyes wide open.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close, it's just crystal clear that the trucking industry is navigating some really significant transformations, huge changes.
Yeah.
From the push for electric vehicles and those ongoing battles for fair freight rates to the consolidation of companies, the evolution of truck technology, and even the shifting legal landscape around personal freedoms. Wow, there's a lot to keep track of.
There really is. And you know, as Hervey from Life as a trucker often reminds people, it's so important to quit and look at these issues from all sides, try to get a complete picture of what's really going on, not just one perspective.
Absolutely. See the whole board. And on that note, while you're out there managing your time, juggling schedules to meet the demands of shippers and keep our economy moving, remember to also invest some of that precious time in yourselves.
So important.
Use your off-duty hours wisely. Maybe explore learning new skills. Perhaps even look into building some online income streams on the side, like our friends at retirefromtrucking.com often talk about. Branch out a bit.
Good advice. Diversify your skills, your income.
Because at the end of the day, drivers deserve to feel valued, respected, and supported, especially in the face of all these massive changes happening around them.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And you know, with all these major shifts underway, it really makes you think, what will be the defining characteristic of a successful trucker in the next decade?
That's a great question.
Yeah, it's something worth pondering, I think, as you continue down the road.